You're watching 360 North.
All right. Well, the health and safety of all Alaskans is of critical importance to the Senate, to the whole legislature. And so what you see today is the legislature, the Senate leading the way to act nimbly to provide the funding that our healthcare professionals need to address the novel coronavirus that we are concerned will infiltrate the state. So with me are finance co-chairs and also the chairman of the Senate Health Committee. So Senator Steadman.
Well, today you can see that the legislature can take pretty fast action when we need to. And clearly with the impact of this virus in Washington state and its proximity to Alaska, we need to respond and be ready quickly and make sure the funds are available for the administration and the $4 million and the appropriation, and also the ability for the administration to receive federal funds, which they need authority to even receive them. So we put it in the quickest vehicle that we had available, which was the mental health budget, which needs to be passed anyway. It's the 2021 budget. And then the virus portion was this current year, using this current year's funds. And it would allow us, let me just real briefly, to pick up hire 5 public health nurses, 3 infectious disease specialists, 1 emergency management specialist, and 1 microbiologist to assist in lab testing. Plus it will leave some other funds available that the governor can allocate around the state and respond as needed.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the point is, although we don't necessarily have cases here in Alaska, we're expecting them to probably arrive here shortly. So if we can get the folks hired, the infrastructure in place all around Alaska, then we can be ready to go when the cases begin to start showing up in Alaska. So this is emergency preparedness, to be ahead of the game, to be in front of the potential pandemic here in Alaska. So that's why we acted fast. We're going to deploy these resources as quickly as possible so we can, the vulnerable population seems to be elderlies. We want elderly folks, we want to make sure that we are providing them the care that they need immediately.
Senator Wilson.
Yes. I just want to thank the administration, working with the Commissioner Crum, the governor, and the Chief Medical Director, Dr. Zink, in their proactive step to ask the legislature for the funds and supplemental requests. We're glad that we were able to act a little bit more quickly and nimbly by putting it into the mental health budget with no conflicts or within our Senate, or hopefully when it goes to the House, we can get it on the governor's desk as quick as possible so we can get these funds allocated, so we can continue to do the proactive steps as setting up the emergency operations centers, what the governor did today, and continuing to make sure that these resources are allocated statewide to help with the response of this epidemic.
So as the bill now left the Senate, it's on its way over to the House. Speaker Edgman is waiting for it. The floor session is waiting for this bill. Now, while this is an urgent issue, I want to emphasize to Alaskans that the advice you're being given by our state medical officer, Dr. Ann Zink, is solid recommendations. Washing hands, the social distance from other people. If you're ill, stay home, and just simple healthy living will help prevent this disease from going crazy in Alaska. So I urge folks to follow Dr. Zink's advice. Information about the virus can be found on the Department of Health and Human Services website. So just Google that, Department of Health, Alaska, and it'll take you right to the website where you can get up-to-date information that is updated, I think, a couple times a day. I know at noon for certain every day they are updating that information. So all Alaskans can have the latest information. We'd be happy to take any questions. Becky.
Mayor, for Senator Giessel or Senator Steadman, put into context the realities of what we're facing in terms of the realities of the business that needs to be done. I may have misheard you, but I thought you talked about the turbulent budget process with the FY21. Can you talk about trying to prioritize and deal with what we need to deal with that, threat, I guess, out there?
Well, clearly this is priority number 1. We pulled it out of the normal budget process and took the mental health budget, which normally evolves, and it's taken care of the last night we're here. And we took a quick action. The normal budget process, including the supplemental to rectify this year's shortfalls and next year's, we're having daily updates on our revenue, and we're having some difficulty, obviously, meeting our expenditures. So that's going to take us a little more time to work through. We have limited savings available, as all Alaskans know. So we need to, take the appropriate time to make sure we have a reasonable budget for FY21. But we can't let the normal budget process slow down the funding to respond to this virus. It changes every day, so we want that pulled it out of the normal sequence, and activated that cash availability immediately.
Maybe, I'm sorry if we're not being clear, but the subcommittee that was set up, one of the priorities is still the budget, and because it has some of those other issues, if you could talk about prioritizing what needs to be accomplished, should there be a case, should there be concerns that might affect the legislature's ability to get its work done?
So Becky, I think you're asking about the Emergency Preparedness Committee that's been created by Legislative Council. So we're about to meet. In fact, we'll interrupt this press availability to go do that. The purpose of that is to establish what are the best practices here in this legislative body. You may have noticed that in France, 2 legislators in their parliament became infected. We would like to prevent that from happening. So we're looking at what the best practices are to prevent that, to keep not only legislators and our staff safe, but to keep the business of the state moving forward. The governor, as Senator Steadman had mentioned, may need more funding. In addition, he's declared an emergency. That emergency is in effect for 30 days. It can be extended by action of the legislature. So we want to make sure that we are healthy and functioning and ready to supply whatever appropriations as the appropriating body, as well as any legislation that might be needed for this urgent need.
If supplemental funding is needed in the future, normally you would address it in next year's supplemental, supplemental budget. Does it become more complicated with the limited amount of money in the CBR and potentially a negative revenue update coming up, as far as thinking about the amount of money that could be needed for a supplemental next year for something like COVID response?
Well, let's back up a little bit. The first call is the current fiscal year, which we're in now ends end of June, and then we'll struggle with and work out FY21's budget. But clearly, there's constraints on our revenue and our savings. We're a little less than $2 billion in the CBR, quickly gonna be reduced. We just haven't. We got to go through the process to have that political. A conclusion on what is the comfortable balance of the CBR, which is for those watching at home, which is our major savings account. $2 billion isn't very much money. $1 billion is scary. $500 million is stay awake at night because you're going to have cash flow issues. So we're going to take a little bit of time to work through it, but we don't want to have our budgetary process to struggling with our deficit to hinder in any way our ability to respond to this health crisis. It's just not going to happen.
For the co-chairs, the coronavirus response wasn't the only thing transplanted into the mental health budget. There was also language regarding the Janus lawsuit, the union lawsuit, and so why is that a priority?
That was put in by the House. I don't think it affects the mental health budget at all. There's $1 million coming in the operating budget. A proposal for that issue. So it was more, I think, a political statement by the House. And rather than go through the process of the Senate modifying the mental health bill and us taking it to conference, that would take several days. It's better just to move the mental health budget forward with the virus appropriation, and we'll deal with that issue later on in the operating budget and the capital budget. I don't think it affects the mental health budget at all. They just added language to that appropriation.
Further questions? Yes.
Alaskans are being told to, self-distance, but is there any plans for the legislature to do that, to have meetings telephonically or even legislative floor sessions?
That decision has not been made yet in terms of teleconference meetings or things like that. All Alaskans have access to the legislature, telephonic testimony, and of course our committee meetings are all on our website and visible to the public. So that has not changed. That is still public access to the legislative body and the work that we're doing here.
With the planning that the committee is going to be doing, is the idea to be able to still make rational, thought-out decisions versus like on the budget or big decisions on the dividend, rush decisions because you feel that you have to act quickly because of the infection concerns?
Becky, we are focused on best practices to keep all legislators and staff in this building safe and able to continue functioning at a methodical, thoughtful, rational way. And so that's the whole purpose of that Emergency Preparedness Committee. When you make a plan and you have a plan in place that you can follow that is well thought out, everybody is better off. And so that's the purpose. It is our plan to stay healthy and to continue our work in the diligent way we've always done it. Further questions?
What's the general timeline for the rest of the budget components?
We've in the Senate have accelerated the closeouts in the operating budget. We're hoping that by the end of next week we'll have the subcommittees closed down and we'll be assembling the operating budget. So we're picking up the pace, but we still want to do a good job for the citizens of the state and looking over our shoulder at this virus issue at the same time.
The end of next week for subcommittees,
We're targeting the end of next week for the closeout of the subcommittees. Can't guarantee I'm going to make it there. We're trying to close them out. Most of them are fairly easy. Some of them are a little more difficult.
And we're probably going to have a capital budget hearing next week as well, public hearing.
My understanding, I don't know if we get a number, but there's a limited number of ventilators in the state, and as a nurse practitioner, do you have any information on that? And what are the concerns if there was a wider outbreak? Don't have so many ventilators.
The question about ventilators, in some communities, yes, there is a limited number of ventilators. Again, Dr. Ann Zink is looking at that infrastructure and how best to utilize it and deploy it. So that would be a very good question to ask our state medical officer. I'm not aware of exactly where she's deploying those resources, but she certainly has identified them, knows them well. I will remind you that Dr. Ann Zink is an emergency room doctor. She is well equipped to deal with this emergency and know what infrastructure is available.
Member, today's meeting is going to be held in private. It's been relatively unusual the last few years to have executive sessions for reasons of like job interviews and that kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts? The Alaska public presumably is pretty interested in what the legislature is planning. Do you have any thoughts on holding this in executive session?
I'm not the chairman of this subcommittee, and that was the chairman's decision. I am simply a member. Thank you. One last question?
For
Yes.
Senator Steadman, knowing that you represent southeast coastal communities, what are you hearing from Ketchikan, Sitka, regarding fear over the possible virus coming here on the cruise ship season?
Well, we're trying to tone down the fear. That's what we don't want. We want a rational, methodical response. And there's always concern when you have, the ships come in with thousands of people into a town of just a handful of thousands of people. And we have limited hospital space and so on and so forth. So we're waiting to see what the industry's response is, and I think the president has asked them for a more thorough review, and that's underway. So we'll just, work that through the process. But it doesn't go unnoticed, and the industry's going to take preventive actions, and all of our communities are going to be very cognizant of them also. So let's all work together, not just panic. We can work through this together, mainly by washing our hands and keeping our distance and not panicking.
And I just want to add, we all have loved ones that we know that could be at risk, that could have respiratory issues, that could be elderly. we want to make sure, and I've worked with the state and the state operation centers during the H1N1 epidemic. They have weekly telephone calls with communities, providers, updates, and their emergency operation plans are well equipped. From community health center plans, I've helped written a couple of those plans in different communities across the state. They are well equipped to handle this in the way that through the advice that's coming out from the CDC and filtering down. We have one of our former chief medical officers, Dr. Butler. Many of you guys know that's been in touch with Dr. Ann Zink and with Commissioner Crum and the governor, also helping advising for the state's response. So I have no doubt that the state is competent and ready to handle this response and meeting those needs of Alaskans and taking the preparedness steps for all communities and the folks concerned.
And just to add on to that, the governor briefed the legislative leadership this morning and was very attentive to the needs of rural Alaska, where infrastructure is limited and where family units are quite large. And he is very focused on that, as is Dr. Zink. So I think that the infrastructure, it will be distributed in the important places, and we're keeping very close eye. In addition, they have brought AFN connections into
Usually when we get the
on that, as is Dr. Zink. So I think that the infrastructure, it will be distributed in the important places, and we're keeping very close eye. In addition, they have brought AFN connections into the center where they're managing the virus and the testing and so forth, so that AFN and different Native group leaders are actually inculcated in these groups and have up-to-the-minute information. So that's all good. The information is going statewide. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you all for joining us for the Senate Majority's press briefing right there. You can hear where their concerns are. Honestly, they don't really have much concerns at all. They reference to Dr. Zink, who is the head medical doctor right at the moment that is running Alaska's CDC's involvement. Please listen to the governor's updates and what she has to say. Obviously, the Senate majority here and the House majority who have been talking about the coronavirus and putting in the mental health bills for the 2020 and the 2021 fiscal budgets. One is the supplemental, the other one's the actual budget, adding extra additional funding into it. They make reference, I watched earlier, to the $250 million that they still have sitting in the fiscal year 2020 budget, the one that we are currently in, and how they're going to appropriate money to help deal with the coronavirus. In all honesty, you have more possibility of getting hit and killed by an automobile out on our streets here in Alaska than you have of dying from this virus. Most people that get the virus, 80%, if not more, from the last report that I've seen come out of the CDC, says that if you are a child, you are in good health, you are an adult, and you are in good health, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. It's going to be a mild cold. You might get a fever. You might not. It's going to seem just like a regular old cold. The people that really need to be concerned is those that have underlying health issues, people that have heart disease, that take blood thinners, people that have respiratory problems and already have the ability to have a hard time breathing. These are the type of people that need to be careful about getting this virus. Common sense, this is no different than any other flu. In fact, statistically, the common flu, number-wise, caused more deaths per year than what this one has, even though the only difference between that and this is they don't have a cure for this. But they have a cure for that. But more people are dying this year, right now, at this very moment, from the common flu than they are from this virus that they're making such a big hoopla, big deal out of. So please stop believing the myths that they're trying to push out there, the fear-mongering that I'm hearing coming from the local media and from major news press. Take your news where you need to get it from. Right now, my advice is listen to what the governor is saying. Listen to what the medical doctor, Dr. Zink, is giving us during those press briefings. She is on the front line with the CDC and knows everything that is going on with this virus. Even she is trying to downplay the hysteria that is being played out by mainstream media right now, local media, about how dangerous this virus is. Be careful. The flood to the stores to fight over toilet paper and make sure you're stocked up on water. All I can say is right now Alaska is the most prepared I have ever seen it for if we were to have an actual earthquake. Another 1964 earthquake. We have nothing to fear. We are prepared. We've got so much water. We've got so much food. I've never seen Alaskans so prepared. For a natural disaster, they won't do this kind of stuff. But for a virus, they are. It's just really confusing. This is if you look statistically at the viruses that have happened throughout time, Obama had several of them that happened during his term. Never once was there an emergency like this declared. Never once did the mainstream media hyperventilate on a daily basis about how deadly it was. Yet more people died in America from these other viruses, and they never once declared a national emergency like what is going on right now. They had it developed to where the WHO, World Health Organization, it was in multiple states. They should have declared it was a pandemic. Never once did. But now, because of this virus, it's a pandemic. They just declared that today. We must fear. We must all be in fear. Quit believing that. It's hyperventilating people that have no clue what they're talking about. They want you to hate those that are in charge right now. That is the whole goal behind this. I have no better way to put it. If you are President Trump right now, you are the bad guy. If you are Governor Dunleavy, you are the bad guy. Governor Dunleavy is getting fingers pointed at him. You've canceled all of your tours around the state to have your town halls right now. Well, that's pretty damn smart. Do you want to be going and meeting with constituents, taking possibility that other people in Alaska are going to show up to his town halls and they're going to get infected and they could catch this flu? The chances go up. Very intelligent move on his part to have canceled them all. Unlike Recall Dunleavy, the group that's trying to oust Governor Dunleavy, they're pushing their events. They've got this, they've got that going on. Please show up, hundreds and hundreds of people. Let's all get together. Let's all meet up. Let's recall the governor and let's spread this virus. You can tell who really cares about the majority of Alaska, which I'll put Governor Dunleavy in that department, and who only cares about the minority special interest. Recall Dunleavy. Recall Dunleavy can care less about this virus going on right now. They really, really, really hope that you show up. And it behooves me to say this, but I kind of believe, and this may or may not be true, they're really counting on someone getting this virus so that they can point fingers at Governor Dunleavy and somehow blame this all on him. Just another failed left's talking point, just like the mainstream media is doing with President Trump right now. Don't forget to share this press briefing. It's unbelievable, the hyper hysteria, the hyperventilating they are doing over this virus. They have $250 million still sitting in the fiscal 2020 year's budget to cover anything extra that they need to do right now. They slipped into the mental health bill, the Janus rule for unions, and I don't understand why it's been slipped into the mental health bill other than they know they need the votes for it because of the coronavirus. This is our House legislators slipping in a bill that has no business being in the mental health bill at all for the Janus rule that is to do nothing but protect the unions, protect the special interests, protect those that are running the Recall Dunleavy campaign out there. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting that they'd be adding that bill into the mental health bill knowing it needs to be passed because of the coronavirus going on right now to protect special interests. what are they going to do? They're going to say, hey, all you legislators that vote no on this, you guys just don't care about Alaskans. When in reality, they're voting no because the House majority decided to slip in the Janus rules bill into the mental health bill, and they're upset because they want to pass a mental health bill. They want to help the majority of Alaskans by passing this mental health bill, but the corrupt, deep state, far-reaching, socialist Democrat rhinos in the House had to slip a bill that has absolutely nothing to do with our mental health into it, and that's where it currently stands right at the moment. So if you were our legislator, you can't blame them if they vote no for this because of the corruption of the deep state and what they're trying to slip into it, knowing this bill needs to be passed. Don't forget to share. Thank you for tuning in. Have yourselves a great day.